Hello, and thank you for joining Cyber Talks. Today we have a special guest, or two special guests, Dale McKay and Bob Plankers from the VMware team. Today, they will be discussing Carbon Black. So thank you for joining us, guys, today.
Thank you for having us.
Wonderful.
Likewise, it's always good to be here.
Wonderful. So, as you may know, since the pandemic, many people have adopted like a remote working lifestyle. For many, this is the new norm. It's caused us to kind of rethink security at the edge and in the cloud to protect endpoint devices in this new kind of working world that we have. Can you tell us about Carbon Black, what it's designed to do, and how our listeners can utilize it in their environments?
Sure. So Carbon Black is not a new product. It's been around for quite some time. The company Carbon Black was acquired by VMware in 2019. They were a full commercial product before VMware ever acquired them. They are, depending upon whose opinion you take, probably one of the top next-gen antivirus endpoint solutions, not just in terms of how it operates and the protection it can provide, but also some of the abilities that it has in terms of auditing, remediation, threat hunting, the ability to take in vast amounts of data from all the different endpoints and to analyze that and to produce actionable threat intel from that data. So that's kind of the high level pitch on Carbon Black. Bob, I think you're a Carbon Black user, just being part of VMware, right?
Yeah, I am, and I have used Carbon Black. I do use Carbon Black. Some of the different stuff, next gen AV, EDR stuff. I really like Carbon Black Workload. I think that's really slick. Vulnerability management in an organization is tough, and how do you see into a workload to see what vulnerabilities are there? How do you look inside VMs? Well, this thing can do it. It can do it on a regular basis. It can do it in a fairly non-intrusive manner and give you a lot of insight. And that's really the whole Carbon Black thing, right? Is information, not only protection, but also information as well, actionable information. And yeah, it's a great suite of products.
Yeah, and Carbon Black, I don't want anybody to walk away thinking it's just a software product. We also have a threat analysis unit that's part of Carbon Black, and then some of the world's leading research on threats, threat intel, and what we'll just call special projects.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the TAU, Threat Analysis Unit, they've got some, yeah, you're right. They've got some great stuff. I was reading some of that actually earlier today, their blogs and things like that. And it's such in-depth information about threats and attack groups that are attacking people, all kinds of stuff.
And then we also just released our managed detection and response service. So this is an additional service that someone could purchase that provides, I guess a good way to think about it is provides an extra set of eyes to monitor your environment. Basically takes the data that your endpoints are sending to the Carbon Black cloud, and that's where that extra set of eyes, it's not just a set of eyes, it's a team of eyes, takes a look at that data as it comes in. And if they see something that's of concern, they reach back out. That's the response part. And we've had actually a lot of really good success with that MDR service. So again, Carbon Black isn't just a software product. There's also other functionality underneath that Carbon Black banner.
Well, managed detection and response, there's a lot of organizations that really aren't big enough or aren't really, operating a security operations center, they're not big enough for it, or it's not really their thing, and so Carbon Black offering that's really cool, actually. So
yeah, it's really kind of a, I don't know, almost a I got your back kind of service.
Okay.
For those, because we know that most modern day SOCs are just inundated with data.
Oh, they're slammed. Yeah.
I mean, if you talk to a lot of guys in the SOC, they'll tell you that they don't feel like they're catching everything just because of the sheer volume of data that they have to go through. Well, the managed detection response service is kind of that extra set of eyes that maybe see something that might have gotten missed. And you know, they have documented cases of them actually saving customer environments because they saw something that the customer didn't see.
Perspective is huge, right? You know, like, and having a different perspective is always nice.
Yep, absolutely.
That's great. Thank you for that. So given the increasing threat landscape due to the use of mobile devices, kind of Internet of Things, cloud computing, standards have evolved to provide secure access from any location or to any asset. So NIST has been diligently working to set new standards by which we operate. Can you tell us about the ongoing zero trust work with NIST NCCOE?
Sure. So VMware as a company has invested heavily in partnering with NIST as part of the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence Zero Trust, or ZTA, Zero Trust Architecture Project. What NIST is attempting to do, and they brought in multiple vendors. VMware is not the only vendor. If you just go to their website, you can see the entire list of vendors. But it's really a collaborative effort between these vendors and NIST to develop an exemplar or maybe a reference architecture or a series of documents that will help most organizations be able to implement zero trust architectures in a meaningful way. Now, I know we've done a podcast with you guys on zero trust. I don't need to go back through that entire podcast here, but that work in conjunction with NIST is really what's going to allow VMware to not only document some of our capabilities, but to highlight to the industry what some of our capabilities are from a zero trust perspective. Bob?
Yeah, no, you're right. And I like the collaborations that we have with NIST and the NCCOE and all these standards groups. NIST has always been a leader in these spaces, and they've been, you know, it's the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology. Their job is to set standards, and I think they're doing a really good job of it. And they also ask for input, and so, you know, we're talkative folks here at VMware, and we love giving input. You know, like, and we've got a perspective on virtual data centers and the cloud and all that stuff that's unique to the industry. And so being able to work with these standards bodies to create these things, and then us helping to do that also ensures that our customers are represented too, you know, that we can find a way to move, as there's new standards, that we can find a way to move customers that have been implementing VMware software for 20 years. You know, how do we move them forward in all of the stuff? How do we get them up to the current best practices, not just best practices 5 years ago or whatever, but, you know, as Dale likes to say, I like to say, security is a process. Security is a journey, right? You know, it's not one thing. And so, you know, our participation in these standards bodies is great, and it really contributes a lot to our offerings. It contributes a lot to the standards themselves, and it makes them, I think it makes them more relevant to our customers too. So I'm excited. I'm excited every time I see what we've done and what NIST is releasing, especially in the zero trust area. There's so much to do in that area.
Yep.
Oh, well, thank you guys. That was a lot of great information that I didn't even know. I'm sure our listeners definitely appreciate that. So we see a lot of our customers moving to multi-cloud implementations. How can Carbon Black provide protection to multi-cloud environments?
So right now, today, as we speak, you can instantiate a Carbon Black protected workload on AWS, Azure, and GCP. And whether that's a native instantiation or whether that's an instantiation on top of one of the VMware engines, VMC on AWS, AVS, GCVE, because at the end of the day, what the Carbon Black sensor is interested in is the operating system that it's installed in. And because our service is cloud-based, the only requirement is that that particular endpoint have internet access or at least be able to access the Carbon Black cloud. At that point, what you now have is the ability to set a consistent security policy across a set of endpoints, no matter which of those public hyperscalers those endpoints happen to reside on. And you could have policies for any method of granularity, meaning I could have a different policy for my Linux endpoints. I could have different policy for my Windows endpoints. You guys get the idea. There are multiple policies that could come into play. The really nice part about this is that the highest level of abstraction concerning these security policies, it's all one policy, and we don't really care what hyperscaler that particular workload or endpoint is operating on. Bob?
Yeah, no, that's the thing. And multi-cloud, the real trick to multi-cloud is, you know, you got your stuff running everywhere. There's a lot of organizations that have had stuff running everywhere for a long time, you know, like how do you manage that? And the different clouds, the native clouds and VMware Cloud offerings, VMware Cloud on AWS, for example, and all that stuff. You've got all this stuff everywhere. How do you keep it managed together? Having one policy, you know, not to make a Lord of the Rings reference, but one policy to rule them all sort of thing, that spans all of that stuff, that doesn't care where your stuff's running, you know, that's really, really powerful, you know, and yeah, like I said, that's the trick to multi-cloud, is just being able to, whatever you set as a security policy, to be able to take it with you. If something migrates, you know, you want the security policies to migrate with it. And, you know, and so that's a real strength of the Carbon Black setup, is that that's true, you know.
Thank you guys for that. That was very informative. Shakita?
Great, thanks. Can you tell us about any specific threats that could have been prevented or severity lessened with the use of Carbon Black?
Well, I think most of the kind of modern day malware, we take advantage of the fact that we understand indicators of compromise, or IOCs, and the IOCs are actually baked into our service. And what I mean by that is the way the sensor works is before it executes anything, it kind of looks and checks to see what the reputation of that particular file is. And if that file has a bad reputation or is marked as do not execute, or however you choose to think about it, that whether that's ransomware or an unwanted program or whatever it might be, that's not going to get executed. That's the action that we're going to take, is to not allow that execution. So if we don't allow that execution, then you are not going to get infected by that particular strain of malware. I mean, if you think about really what we're talking about, malware is code. I mean, it comes down to two things. It's either the code that generates the attack, and in some cases, we can even analyze the strings within that code. So now if I know what that code looks like, I can prevent the execution of that code. And at that point, all I've got is some extra junk code sitting on a system somewhere, not even necessarily malware. It's just a bunch of code sitting there. It doesn't really become malware. It's not a problem until it gets executed. You know, if you think about it in very granular terms, if I have code on there that was supposed to do some malware-like function and it never executes that malware function, am I infected? I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah. Should you keep it around? Probably not. But you know, I'm sitting here thinking that it's kind of like snow. You know, you're not wet until the snow melts, that sort of thing. And you know, but you know, the Carbon Black, the ability for the Carbon Black tools to analyze this stuff. You talk about reputation, but reputation is so much more than the traditional antivirus reputation. You know, like reputation is It's some of that, sure. Like, is this something malicious the rest of the world has seen already? Oh, we can deal with that. But, also the ability to deal with very specific attacks that where the attack is very targeted at a particular user or something. Sometimes it's spear phishing is the term that they use for it, where the attack is very specific to an individual. It's very targeted malware, custom malware. There's whole ecosystems of malware and ransomware ecosystems, and that the malware designers, you can buy customized malware for just, if I wanted to infect Dale, like I could buy a very specific version of a piece of malware and send it to the guy, like that sort of thing. And so being able to catch that, what is the reputation of this file? It's brand new, it could open it up, and you talked about strings. There's all this obfuscation inside of these malware components to try to hide what they're doing. Well, Carbon Black disassembles that stuff on the fly, finds all those strings, finds those URLs. Hey, we know that URL has a terrible reputation, and that this thing is going to try to talk to that URL out there, that has a terrible reputation because it's been implicated in all this other malware. Like that's just next level stuff, and that's the Carbon Black that's the stuff I like about Carbon Black, the ability to find that sort of stuff and deal with it. And not just sure, there's some wisdom in crowds. I mean, crowds can be dumb too, sure, but in this case, there's more wisdom in the crowds, but also using that as a voice in the chorus, and to try to get a sense of whether this thing is safe or not. Do you really want to take this risk? And then even just presenting that to the user. You're doing something risky here, pal. You might want to knock it off,
Right. And, one of the, I guess I can talk about this in kind of general terms. One of the places that we're going with Carbon Black is to integrate different sources into some of the feeds that we see. Let me walk you through a scenario. We partner with an organization, let's say Proofpoint. And if you're not familiar with Proofpoint, they specialize in analyzing email. All right, so Proofpoint sees an email come in that it believes had a phishing link in it. We are able to see from the endpoint detection of Carbon Black that yes, indeed, the link was clicked on within the email that was suspect. And from a network detection capability, we're able to see that right after that link was clicked on, there was network traffic to a known server. So I would say at that point, we have produced a high fidelity alert that indeed that particular endpoint has been compromised. It's been compromised through a phishing attack, and we could probably determine what family of malware by the C2 server that it reached out to. So that's the visibility that Carbon Black is working to bring to everything that we see in terms of malware.
That's great. Thank you for that.
I know we're kind of, running a little low on time. Just another quick question for you, Dale or Bob, whichever you guys like to take it. But what would we would like to know if there's anything that you think users would benefit by knowing about Carbon Black and the NIST framework.
Bob, I'm going to let you take that one first.
Sure, yeah, I'll start it off and then you can wrap it up here. I think users should figure out what's best about it by buying the product and using it. No, which I think would be terrific. I'm a big fan myself. Anything that I think users would benefit knowing about this stuff. We've covered a lot of stuff, like, and it does a lot. It's a suite of products. It's not just, antivirus. There's other stuff. Like I said earlier, I'm a big fan of Carbon Black workload, the visibility there. The number of times when I was a vSphere admin and somebody came into my office from our information security group and said, hey, there's this new 0-day, like this is new vulnerability. Where is it? I don't know, beats the heck out of me, like I would have loved to have that product, that you just open it up and say, hey, it is on these 850 VMs, and you go, oh my goodness. And then then we can get right to work, instead of having to spend several days figuring it out and all of that stuff. I think that's beautiful. I think it's wonderful. And I'd like to take it back in time with me and give it to myself 5 years ago. Unfortunately, that's not how this works. So, but it's Carbon Black is a whole suite of tools. There's a lot of capabilities, especially a lot of cool stuff too around some of the new, the modern apps and the vSphere with Tanzu and the Kubernetes functionality too, helping protect all of that stuff, building it into the supply chains, as our customers build things for their customers, how do we instill trust in everything? Carbon Black has got a giant role to play in that.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned about containers, and that's really some of the newest functionality that we've just produced and brought to market. Is not only do we support a repository or registry scanning, which is typically where your containers would be built from, but we also support runtime scanning now. So as you're operating those containers, we have the ability to scan them and to make sure that indeed they are the containers that you thought you stood up.
And the containers are workloads, they get breached like a VM does sometimes too, so.
Exactly. So it's not just the laptop, desktop endpoint, it's also the workloads, it's also the containers, and all of that is wrapped up into a service and offering that provides pretty much unparalleled visibility into exactly what's taking place on those different platforms.
Well, thank you for your time today, both Bob and Dell. We've enjoyed the time that you've spent with us, and we've learned a lot about Carbon Black and how to apply the NIST framework. As always, we look forward to having you back for another episode of Cyber Talks. And now we'll turn it back over to Van to close us out.
Thank you again, Dale. Thank you also, Bob, for joining us again for the third time now. We definitely want to get you guys back on some more. You guys seem to have a lot of great information for us and for our listeners. We do appreciate that. So for the listeners at home, thanks again for listening. As always, if you have any questions, any comments, please leave them in the comment section below. We'll do our best to try to get those answered for you. If you have anything specific for Dale or Bob, please, annotate that. We'll try to get those questions over to them and get the answers to you as soon as we can. As always, thank you and enjoy your day.